everyone. I'm Emma. This is Gabe, and we're sitting with the fantastic CEO and founder of Tilt. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the headache of leave management. What are you seeing are kind of some of the most common mistakes that HR or organizations in general are making revolving leave management?
Some of the most common offenders, top of the list is payroll. We have spoken with many of our payroll friends who have said, in hindsight, I did that completely wrong, or I've been doing that completely wrong for years, or I didn't know I was supposed to do it that way, which we get it. Like no harm, no foul. It is absolutely the most complex component of what we've automated in our technology. And it is very easy to get wrong. So top of the list is inaccurate payroll calculations as it relates to how a leave of absence is being paid for. I would say after that, especially in recent times, the construction of the paid leave policies and the job protection policies. So a leave of absence is architected in a number of different ways that are commensurate with how much time can you take and know your job is safe and how much of your time is going to be paid for and in what percentage and duration, et cetera. So when you try to stack all of those elements, again, the risk to getting that wrong is pretty damn high. And the risk to getting that wrong is also legally exposing to an organization, because if you qualify or disqualify a certain component of that stack erroneously, you could be on the hook and on the hook in a big way, which is scary for anyone involved. Those would be the big two. I think beyond that, it's, this one I've seen time and time again before this world of leave and after, but consistency and application of policies is an interesting line to walk, because I love one of my HR friends says, it's really the spirit of the policy more so than the letter of the law. And how I've seen that play out in application is you may have an employee, for example, who has worked at an organization for 11 months and not 12. They're not qualifying yet for FMLA, but they're real damn close. Is that HR team going to take the hard line on absolutely not, you're not job protected, or are they going to operate within the spirit of the policy? Now, when they do that, there's a consistency component that they just need to be aware of. And so I see it, I observe, and I wrestle alongside with my HR teammates around where does that line fall, given any unique situation that they might be presented. And at the end of the day, we're dealing with humans, and humans are messy, and sometimes we do our best. But this particular job function of leave of absence management is particularly risky, again, because the legal components and the payroll components that are intertwined throughout.
And how do you view the just manual processes that HR teams are usually trying to do this with, whether they're doing it all on their own or doing some of it in-house, like on spreadsheets, or using carriers and having siloed systems? Like,
yeah,
does that put them at a disadvantage to like circumvent some of these issues?
Oh yeah. I have seen some of the most incredibly dynamic spreadsheets you can imagine that are in place at organizations as big as 10,000 employees and up. It absolutely boggles my mind. The siloed systems that don't talk to each other, that need to be manually updated by a human anytime there's a human fat finger potential, especially in a world like leave of absence, it's dangerous. The system's not talking to each other, could have stale information truly every single day. Leave of absence has over 70% of the leaves that we support are adjusted, just to give a statistical analysis to how dynamic this world is. And those adjustments come in the form of baby comes early, baby comes late, payroll changes. There's a company holiday during a leave of absence. Do you pay for that? Do you not pay for that? You have sales-based or a sales-based teammate that's going on a leave of absence. Is there a commission component to that? There's just all sorts of intricacies that result in that dynamic nature, that operating in siloed systems that don't talk to each other and human entered is just ripe for errors.
I feel like we hear so often, there's kind of two versions of people that come to Tilt, right? There's the version that knows they're potentially putting themselves at risk or managing things incorrectly, or that they, that there are ways that they could be better managing. And then there are the people who are maybe managing incorrectly, but feel maybe a little untouchable. They're like, this is just how I've always done it. And
Yeah.
I know that I can get sued, or I know that there are potential legal consequences, but that's not going to happen to me. What are your, like, what's your perspective on that? Or what would you say to someone who is maybe presenting in that way?
I get it, is how I would answer it. We have some incredibly talented and seasoned HR professionals that have managed leave since the beginning of time. And that lived experience cannot be understated. It's incredible. What I would offer is that, again, the times are against them with how complex it has become of a leave landscape, that even the most experienced leave of absence professional becomes outpaced in a month and certainly in a year, because of how much is shifting and changing in this space. So those that have the pride around the domain expertise, they're an incredible partner, and we've learned a ton from them. And where we can help is, let's take all of that information you don't need to hold in your head and have it in the technology so that you can be on the cutting edge. You can be part of that next evolution of leave of absence, as a SME, and we love to see it. So I respect it and I honor it.
And what would you say if you're someone in the middle between who I'm described? Like maybe they aren't sure if their processes are good enough, or they think maybe they're okay, or they're not sure. What are the signs that they can point to where they might say like, oh, that's telling me that I'm probably using a process or a system that's outdated?
Well, that's a great question. I think somebody that's in the middle or on the fence of, do I know enough to continue to maintain leave of absence management on my own or not, could be around consistency of application. Potentially a couple leaves come up and they're distributing either policies or leave laws differently. That's probably a red flag to lean into. Could be they're in one of the states that does have paid leave legislation. I sit in the state of Colorado. We're proudly one of those states. That is changing very quickly. The requirements to the organization, the reporting requirements, et cetera. That's, I would argue, a forcing function to look for help because it is so complex and it is not optional. Certainly in California, every single employer listening in California, please ask for help because that is crazy complex. And New York, you're right behind it. So I think those are some of the other indications to look for. But, I always go back to the original inspiration of this crazy world of Tilt being TurboTax. And I did, and I still loathe filing my taxes. I think it is the most fear-inducing, complex, crazy workflow that every single law-abiding US taxpayer has to go through. And that inspiration is still a mainstay as to how we are continuing to build automation in Tilt, because there are so many corollaries in a changing legislative landscape, leave landscape, tax landscape. Every year there's new tax policies and procedures that come out. In the unique to you construction. So I sit in this state, I do this profession, this is what my election is of my taxes throughout the year. I have these children, I have these assets, I had this liquidation. I mean, there are just so many considerations that are unique to one solution of a tax situation. It is almost exactly the same for leave of absence. So you have where you're working, what job you're doing, how long you've been there, what type of leave it is, all of those considerations. I mean, it's almost a mirrored example. And so those that are on the fence, I would just say, do you do your own taxes in a long form way? And do you read the tax updates every single year? Because it is just as complex and just as dynamic.
Yeah, it's a great analogy. Yeah.
Kind of swinging into a different direction, what are some symptoms that you would have an HR person look out for that maybe their policies or processes are outdated? Something that maybe they're not quite sure that they're ready for a solution. What would be something that you'd want them to look out for?
If HR professionals are wondering if their policies are outdated or in the back of the pack, ask your employees is my first recommendation. People talk, people share benefits, people are seeing what their peers are getting as it relates to leave of absence at other organizations. For those that are really astute, they're Googling and they're seeing what best in class looks like. So I think a really low hanging and easy way to do a gut check is to go do a listening tour, deploy a survey, whatever that might be, to garner either the data of what do your employees feel, or even simply what is their perception of your policy. Very often we find that the communication and the explainability of a policy is really what the barrier is in terms of employees knowing either how good they've got it or what is even available to them, et cetera. So I think it's just a good gut check and a good hygiene to have a consistent schedule of a lay of the land. Do they know it? Do they love it? Are we behind the times? Do we need to potentially diversify? Has our demographic shifted? And in my opinion, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't think there's any data set that's more powerful than your people. So ask your people. And then after that, there's all the benchmarks in the world. There's all the data sets in the world. There's this company called Tilt that can provide benchmarks. There's all sorts of ways to vet that against larger data sets.